If you ever find yourself stuck in the middle of the sea, I'll sail the world to find you. If you ever find yourself lost in the dark and you can't see, I'll be the light to guide you. Find out what.
Good afternoon, Westfield, and welcome to this week's Story Assembly. This week, our story is all about listening to each other. Listening and really giving each other that attention and time that we all deserve. So this story is by the writers of a great book called Dogs Don't Do Ballet. But this story this week is called Rhinos Don't Eat Pancakes. So it starts like this, with a little introduction. Do you ever get the feeling that your mum and dad aren't listening to a word you say? You do? Then you are just like Daisy. Her mum and dad never listen. Daisy could tell them that her hair was on fire or that the dog had eaten the postman. But they would just nod and say, "Oh, that's nice, dear," or "Tell your gran," or "Can't you see I'm on the phone?" So, one day, Daisy had something really important to say. And guess what? Nobody listened. So this is what happened. Rhinos don't eat pancakes. Daisy was eating her breakfast when a big purple rhino strolled into the kitchen. That's right, a big purple rhino. It was as big as a bus and as purple as a plum. It was also a bit peckish, so it took a chomp of Daisy's pancake and went upstairs. "Mum, Mum," Daisy called, "there's a big—" "Tell your dad," said Mum. "He'll catch it in a mug and throw it out of the window." "Dad, Dad," said Daisy, there's a huge, "Shh," said Dad, "the spider can wait." "It's not a spider," Daisy shouted. "It's a big purple rhinoceros." But, as usual, nobody listened. Meanwhile, the rhino made himself feel right at home. Daisy saw him in the hall and glimpsed him in the garden. She spied him in the bathroom and surprised him on the loo. But every time she tried to tell her parents, they'd say, "Shh, Daisy, can't you see we're busy?" Daisy's parents were busy all week. So Daisy began to talk to the rhino instead. Soon they became good friends. They played hoopla and made pizza together, and the rhino tickled Daisy until she thought she would burst. But Daisy's parents took no notice. Until the pancakes ran out. "Who ate all the pancakes?" yelled Dad, looking straight at Daisy. "It was the rhino," said Daisy. "Rhinos don't eat pancakes," said Dad. "This one does," cried Daisy. "I saw him in the kitchen." "A rhino?" said Mum. "In the kitchen?" said Dad. "Yes," said Daisy, "exactly." Mum and Dad roared with laughter. "Whatever next?" they hooted. "A shark in the toilet? A polar bear in the fridge?" "There he is! Look!" Daisy yelled. But Mum and Dad were so busy laughing that they just didn't take any notice. "Come on, Rhino," said Daisy. "I've had enough of this." The rhino tickled Daisy with his horn, but she was far too glum to giggle. "Mum and Dad never listen," she sighed. "They're always a million miles away." The rhino sighed deeply through his big purple nostrils. "I'm sorry, Rhino," said Daisy. "Your family are a million miles away too, aren't they?" The rhino nodded, and a lilac tear rolled down his cheek. Poor Rhino. That night, Daisy sat up, thinking of ways to get the rhino back home to his family. He was far too heavy for a hot air balloon, and too big for Daisy's rubber dinghy, She thought about lending him her bike, but the helmet would never fit. The next morning, Mum and Dad had a surprise. "We are taking you to the zoo," said Mum, "so you can see a real rhino." "What do you think of that?" grinned Dad. Daisy thought it was a daft idea when there was already a perfectly good rhino sitting there on the sofa. But she didn't say so. I mean, what was the point? Nobody would listen anyway. At the zoo, Daisy saw yellow giraffes, bright red parrots, orange and black tigers and grass-green snakes. But she couldn't help thinking about her poor purple rhino. "Hurry up, Daisy," said Mum. "The rhinos are this way." But what was this? When they got there, all they saw was a poster. "Missing. Big purple rhino. Likes pancakes. If found, please call the zoo." "Cripes!" gasped Mum. "Well, that explains the pancakes," agreed Dad. Mum, Dad and Daisy rushed back home, and guess what they saw when they got there? That's right, the biggest, purplest rhinoceros in town. "What did I tell you?" said Daisy, grinning from ear to ear. "I'm phoning the zoo," said Mum. The rhino looked startled. "No," said Daisy, "not the zoo. He needs to go back to his family, and they are 1,000,000 miles away." "Oh, well, we'd better get a move on," said Dad. "The next flight to 1,000,000 miles away leaves this afternoon." The rhino packed his suitcase while Daisy found his hat. Then they all pushed his big purple bottom into the back of the car and drove to the airport. "I'll miss you," said Daisy as the rhino boarded the plane. The rhino gave her a big purple hug. He would miss her too. Back at home, Daisy began to feel lonely again. Who would listen to her now? But little did she realise that everything was about to change. "Tell us about the rhino, Daisy," said Mum. "Yes," said Dad. "Tell us about that big, purple, pancake-eating rhino." So Daisy told them all about Hoopla and pizza and the tickles, and guess what? They listened and listened until she had completely run out of words. It was brilliant. "Is there anything else you'd like to tell us?" asked Mum as she tucked Daisy into bed that night. Daisy looked out onto the landing. "No, that's all for now," said Daisy, smiling. "Night-night." The pink polar bear will have to wait until tomorrow. The end. So this story is a reminder of how important it is to spend time with each other, to listen to one another, whether that's our family or with our friends. And actually, sometimes we might think we're listening. We might be going, yeah, no, great idea. But actually, are we really taking in what's being shared with us? A little bit like in our learning as well. Sometimes we might think we're listening. We might look like we're listening. But actually really engaging in what we call active listening is when we're thinking about what somebody is saying and we're responding back to them. Just like the difference between the beginning of the story, when Daisy was trying to explain about what the rhinoceros was doing and how there was this big purple rhinoceros in their house, and at the end of the story, when her family took time just to listen to her and share in that experience with her and really take on board what she was saying. And what a difference for Daisy. Suddenly she felt part of the family more, she felt secure, just like we would do in our friendships and in our own families. Whether we're listening to brothers and sisters, hearing about each other's day when we go home at the end of the day, listening to each other about our weekends, or just spending time just being with one another and ensuring that we give each other that quality time. So, just encourage you to take time to listen to one another and really listen, and take that time to be curious and interested in what somebody else wants to share. Take care, Westfield. Bye-bye.
On me like 1, 2, 3, I'll be there. And I know when I need it, I can count on you. Like 4, 3, 2, and you'll be there. 'Cause that's what friends are supposed to do.